When you think of a gaming cult classic, many titles may come to mind, especially the ones that came out in the 2000s and 2010s. Ico, Okami, Psychonauts, Battle for Bikini Bottom, Spec Ops The Line, and of course Alan Wake. Alan Wake was released in 2010 for the Xbox 360 and follows the title character Alan Wake, a best-selling writer who with his wife holiday in the small town of Bright Falls, only for her to go missing and with Alan having to find her, while being stopped by these shadowy figures that have come about from Alan's own writing, taking heavy inspiration from a show like Twin Peaks with an intriguing story and unique gameplay. Needless to say, Alan Wake reviewed rather well when it released, with 8s and 9s across the board, an obvious success for Remedy after their work on Max Payne 1 and 2, which were both received well, but Alan Wake was clearly a passion project from Remedy, and in particular the game's director Sam Lake. Excellent critic reviews, it would only seem fitting that a sequel would follow, but unfortunately, Alan Wake was a cult classic for a reason, as the game did not sell incredibly well. 3 million copies isn't what you would call a flop, but when the year is 2010 and every gaming company is trying to compete with the sales numbers of Call of Duty, 3 million just simply wasn't enough, meaning the game would not receive a sequel and solidifying Alan Wake as a cult classic. So Remedy moved on, making games such as Quantum Break and then Control, which was a huge success, so it looked like the hopes for a sequel to Alan Wake dwindled. But then Control released a DLC called the AWE, basically a DLC which in a way was a follow-up to the DLC American Nightmare from the original Alan Wake. Yeah, it wasn't the full-fledged sequel that fans were wanting and waiting for, but it was something at least, for fans to latch onto, and we didn't have to wait too much longer to get the news that the fans had been waiting for.
Is a monster. And monsters wear many faces.
Wake 2 had finally been announced, and the trailer was dark and creepy. It looked like Alan Wake 2 was going to be changing from a dark action-based game to a full-on survival horror, which everyone agreed was the perfect match for both Alan Wake and Remedy. And shortly after the trailer, Sam Lake himself confirmed that this would be Remedy's first survival horror, a match made in heaven, or in hell depending on how you want to see it. And 2 years later, on October 27th, 2023, after 13 years since the release of the first game, we finally got our hands on Alan Wake 2. And 12 months later, let's look back at the Herald of Darkness. Wake 2 feels like the game Remedy was always destined to make for years. They've been making games with solid shooting mechanics, interesting stories, and really good world building for years now, and Alan Wake 2 feels like an accumulation of everything that Remedy has learned over the years. Firstly, Alan Wake 2 is absolutely gorgeous. Honestly, even 12 months later, I dare say there is a better looking game out there. I am no means a graphics snob, because gameplay in my opinion is always the most important part of a game, but my god does the presentation do wonders for the experience here. The small Twin Peaks inspired town of Bright Falls is absolutely stunning in its low sunlight covering the town or over Cauldron Lake, but the neon noir New York inspired dark place makes you feel like you're in a gritty police drama. It does such a good job at capturing what they were trying to go for in the first game by expanding it and making it a lot more like a real place. Because as much as the first game has its own type of charm, due to limitations of the original, Bright Falls doesn't really feel realised like it does in Alan Wake 2. Obviously there is a genre switch from the first game, the tone of the game in terms of its presentation, its themes and how the story is told, and which gets into the story, which if you've played any of Remedy's other story heavy games, Quantum Break, Control and even the first Alan Wake, when I say this with nothing but love. Alan Wake 2 is definitely the weirdest game Remedy have ever made in the best possible way. Alan Wake 2 is just straight up a sequel to the first game. Alan is stuck in the dark place looking for Alice, so we take control of the brand new character Saga Anderson, an FBI agent who's sent to Bright Falls to investigate a group called the Cult of the Tree. This is alongside playing as Alan, who is trying to escape the dark place, so a dual protagonist story, Interesting, but it's something that's been done before. But the thing that makes Alan Wake 2 so strange is how everything is presented. So in this survival horror game that is drenched so much in a spooky, oppressive atmosphere, you have Alan being thrusted into a TV studio and being interviewed that quickly turns into a full-blown musical number. It's just absurd and goofy, and I love it. This alongside Saga's story, who like previously mentioned is investigating a cult alongside her partner Alex Casey, who just happens to be played by Sam Lake himself, aka Max Payne. Not weird at all. The way the whole narrative is held really does feel like Remedy at their most weird and their most wonderful, because the story, although weird, is very captivating. The mystery behind what the cult is trying to achieve, what Alan's role in the story is, and will he ever get him and Alice out of the dark place. Remedy took the task of their first survival horror and well and truly mastered the presentation and narrative. The gameplay for Alan Wake 2 is straight from the Resident Evil 4 handbook that's been the industry standard for all third-person shooters since 2005. But hey, if it's not broke, don't try and fix it, and it works perfectly here. Adding on to this the flashlight mechanic from the first game, it's a perfect addition. With the first game, to fight the Taken, you have to shine your flashlight to remove the shadowy presence around them, and then dispatch them with your weapon. In the first game, you're given plenty of ammo and batteries for your flashlight, so you'll have a lot of enemies to deal with. But in the second game, the enemies are a lot less frequent, but so are your resources. Typical survival horror. If anything, the lack of resources in Alan Wake 2 adds to the tension you feel while playing, because yes, like every survival horror game, you have limited ammo, limited healing, but in Alan Wake 2, you have another resource to manage, your flashlight. In any other survival horror, a flashlight is something that is taken for granted, as you don't need to worry about it running out, as it's an unlimited resource. But with Alan Wake 1 and 2, you can only use it as long as you have batteries. These are plentiful in Alan Wake 1, but 2, they're a lot more scarce, and without a flashlight, not only can you not see where you're going, but you also can't do anything against the main enemies of the game, the Taken. As without a flashlight, you can't take away the shadowy shield that protects them. This is added tension on a genre well known for having tension. So even though Alan Wake 2 doesn't make you shit your pants in terror not being able to sleep at night, it certainly knows how to make you feel tense when you need it to. Although I have nothing but praise for Alan Wake 2 as a whole, especially when it comes to the story and the presentation, I pretty much think Remedy nailed it. I do have some slight nitpicks when it comes to the gameplay. Firstly, although I like the introduction of Saga as a character to the Remedyverse, her connection to two important characters from the first game was interesting to discover, but her mind palace type thing she needs to do to further her story, although novel and cute at first, becomes a little bit repetitive towards the end of the story, when it feels like you're going there every 5 minutes. And although Alan has his own version where he changes the dark place through the manuscript and the angel light, there is unfortunately no differences between Saga and Alan when it comes to combat. Don't get me wrong, I don't need them to play completely different from one another, but some slight differences would be nice. I mean, Saga is a trained FBI agent, she should be a badass and well equipped to deal with the Taken and the Cult of the Tree, and she is, but Alan feels the exact same as her. I know the argument can be made that Alan has been fighting his way through the Dark Place for 13 years, so he's bound to have picked up a few things combat wise, but it's also pretty clear that Alan has lost himself while being trapped for so long. I don't know, I just think he should play the exact same as Saga. He should be a little bit more clunky compared to her, but in the grand scheme of things, these are very much nitpicks. So it's pretty clear that 12 months later, I still think Alan Wake 2 is an absolutely fantastic video game. If anything, the game is now better, with the release of the 2 DLCs, the Night Springs and the Lake House expansion. Although I haven't played them yet for myself, I have only heard great things. Sam Lake and Remedy poured their love into a project they clearly thought for the longest time they were never going to be allowed to make, but lo and behold, there was an unexpected hero for them. Epic Games. You know, the company behind that relatively unknown Battle Royale game that came out in 2017 called Fortnite? Well, maybe because they had so much Fortnite money that it was burning a hole in their pocket, but they funded the development cost of Alan Wake 2. So without them, one of the greatest survival horror games ever made would not exist. That only makes it more disappointing to hear about how the game has sold. Critically, the game did fantastic, 9s and 10s across the board. The sequel that was 13 years in the making was very much worth the wait. Epic just let Remedy cook, but as I'm writing this script, Alan Wake 2 has yet to make back its production costs, let alone make a profit, and I can't express how disappointing that is, when truly amazing pieces of art don't see the recognition that it deserves. Does this mean this is the last we'll see of Alan Wake? God, I hope not, because Remedy are so unbelievably talented. I need another musical performance for Alan Wake 3 at the Game Awards one day. Seeing Sam Lake's happy smiley face reminds me of how much I truly do love this industry. If you watched the end, thank you. I really appreciate it. And let me know what you think of Alan Wake 2 in the comments down below. And if you liked the video, please consider liking and subscribing. It helps a small channel like mine out more than you would ever realise, so thank you. And hopefully, I will see you again.